Good afternoon. I'm Dave Boocker, Dean of the College of Arts and Sciences, and I want to welcome you to the next installment of our year-long virtual seminar series. The goal of this series is to showcase the great work our college faculty, students, and staff are doing to address the critical challenges of our time. Many of you may recall that in fall of 2019, UNO's Weber Art Gallery housed an exhibit of 70 of Sam Bak's paintings, along with an international symposium in honor of Sam's work. These events were a partnership with Pucker Gallery of Boston and the Sam and Frances Freed Academy for Holocaust and Genocide Studies, led by Dr. Mark Celinscak, and were sponsored by 3 internationally recognized institutions housed at UNO: the aforementioned Freed Academy, the Natan and Hannah Schwab Center for Israel and Jewish Studies, and the Leonard and Shirley Goldstein Center for Human Rights, along with the Goldstein Family Community Chair in Human Rights. In addition, the success of the event was made possible because of cross-campus collaborations that included the College of Arts and Sciences, College of Communication, Fine Arts and Media, and College of Education, Health and Human Sciences. Called Witness, the Art of Samuel Bak, this exhibition drew more than 4,500 visitors, including more than 2,000 high school and middle school kids. Sam visited UNO for several days in September to participate in a variety of programming and delivered an inspiring keynote address. 3 paintings from this exhibit are now housed for public viewing in UNO's Chris Library, along with a dedicated box space for his memoir and scholarly books. Today, we will focus on the Art of Samuel Bak and the incredible partnership that is developing between Mr. Bak and the University of Nebraska at Omaha. This project is one of UNO's big ideas, and we are grateful to the support of Chancellor Gold and Senior Vice Chancellor Kopp in its development. The Sam Bak Museum and Learning Center at the University of Nebraska at Omaha will be the only major collection of work by Sam Bak housed on a university campus in the world. Sam has generously donated more than 500 original works, and the Bak Museum will allow UNO to foster formative connections between the art of Sam Bak and the students of all ages for years to come. The Samuel Bak Museum and Academic Learning Center will provide critically important interdisciplinary educational experiences on topics ranging from art and history, to international relations and politics, to philosophy and human rights. Bak's work helps us make important connections between the Holocaust and the moral choices we confront in our own lives. Before we get started, I want to let you know that you can ask questions using the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. Joining me today are Dr. Mark Celinscak, Assistant Professor of History. Mark serves as the Lewis and Frances Blumkin Professor of Holocaust and Genocide Studies and Director of the Freed Academy. As I noted, Mark led the development of the program that brought Bak and 70 of his paintings to UNO. Bernie Pucker, owner of Pucker Gallery in Boston, who has been Mr. Bak's patron and friend for more than 50 years. And of course, we are honored to have with us Sam Bak, world-renowned artist and witness to the deeds and misdeeds of the 20th and 21st centuries. Let me begin with Mark. Please tell us what inspired you to bring Sam Bak's paintings to UNO.
Thank you, Dave, for the question. And of course, thank you for hosting this event today. Well, the answer to that question involves 2 of the men on the screen. I've studied the art of Samuel Bak for many, many years, stretching back to my graduate studies. As a cultural historian of the Second World War and the Holocaust, Sam's visual testimony has had a major impact on me, particularly on my teaching and my research. I think his work has encouraged me to reflect more deeply on historical reality. So for example, in several of my courses, I explore with my students the Nuremberg trials that followed the Second World War. And while these are, of course, landmark legal proceedings, we often consider the ways in which they fell short. After such horrible events, what does justice look like, and is it even possible? As we study these trials, I have my students review work from Sam's Just Is series, which I think demonstrates that our world does not offer absolute justice, but often settles for what is just as it is. So I think his work helps complicate and challenge the ideas that we have about topics like responsibility, rights, the possibilities of renewal. I hold his art in the highest regard, and I was really, truly honored to help bring it to Omaha. Now, the second part of that answer is of course, Bernie Pucker, because without him, I don't think Sam's work would have made it to UNO, at least not in the way that it did. Many years ago, when I was still living in Canada, Bernie reached out to me about my first book. And after I got over the initial shock that someone actually wanted to talk to me about my book, we began to correspond regularly, and that soon blossomed into a very meaningful friendship. The fact that Pucker Gallery, as you said, has represented Sam since 1969 was a bonus, of course. And so when I accepted my position at UNO in 2016, I reached out to my friend Bernie to explore the idea of bringing Sam's art to UNO. 3 years later, we made it happen, and I guess we're still working on that plan. So it's been such a privilege to work with these two men, and with you too, Dave, of course, to help create greater awareness in our community about the work of such an important artist.
Thank you. Can you briefly describe the mission and value of the Bak Museum and Learning Center to UNO and to the Omaha community and beyond?
Sure. I think one of the objectives of the Bak Museum and Learning Center is to build and expand on the success of the 2019 exhibition featuring Sam's art. I think it provides an excellent blueprint for us moving forward. It brought together multiple colleges working towards a common goal. Dave, as you mentioned, we engaged not only with UNO students, not only with UNO faculty and community members, but also more than 2,000 middle and high school students. And the feedback from both teachers and students was tremendous. Now, I think as educators, I think it is critical that the Bak Museum engage with the next generation of students. As fewer survivors remain and as our world continues to be increasingly divided, dialogue about bigotry, racism, the value of human rights, I think they're desperately needed. So I think the future Bak Museum can provide such a forum. Studies demonstrate that, learning about the Holocaust, for example, enhances attitudes towards diversity and tolerance. Students can develop the ability to better react to prejudice when they see it. I think this is where Sam's art becomes so important. It helps us make connections between history and the moral choices we confront in our everyday lives. It offers us a framework. It offers us a vocabulary for analyzing the meaning and responsibility of citizenship, for example. And I think it can challenge us to recognize the bigotry and indifference that exists all around us. I think the Bak Museum will also continue to forge relationships with the many vibrant centers we already have on campus, ones that focus on the Holocaust, human rights, Jewish studies, medical humanities, and so much more. So I think collaboration will be key, not only on campus, but across the university system and throughout the Midwest. So I think these will be some of the central components of UNO's Samuel Bak Museum and Learning Center.
Terrific, Mark. Thank you so much. So Bernie, you have had the privilege of working with Sam Bak for more than 50 years. Why do you think having Sam's work on a university campus is important, and why UNO? And welcome.
Thank you. It's a pleasure, Dave. It's a pleasure being with all of you. First and foremost, I think Mark has already answered the question for all of us. And that specifically has to do with the fact that I have dreamed of having Sam's work available on a meaningful basis on a university campus, where questions and ideas can be presented and dealt with and eventually influence the behavior of young people who will become the leaders of our world. UNO is close to my heart because I grew up in Kansas City. So the Midwest in general is for me a very welcoming, important place where one feels access to and comfortable with who they are and the people around them. So a university setting in the Midwest is critical. And it also provides an opportunity for people who may not have encountered many of the issues and ideas that Sam's work deals with, to deal with it at the highest level. There are a couple of quotes, one of which I want to share with you from Brother Thomas, who was an artist we worked with for many years, and he and I actually corresponded by fax every day for the 23 years we worked together, and we have 19 boxes of his writings. but one of them really speaks to why it should be here and what our responsibility is. We're not really whole until we take on the responsibility for others and for the whole world. And ultimately, that is what a university is about. It is to, in fact, enable young people to realize that they have a responsibility, moral and otherwise, to forming and developing the potential of us as human beings for good. So I'm incredibly excited and really, really grateful to all of you, especially to Sam, because we've worked together and a loving friendship has been part of our lives and enriched it in very special ways. But stumbling across Mark and his book, and now working with Dave and Sasha and the Chancellor has been an amazing experience. Of another quote of Thomas's, when good people meet, good things happen. And that's exactly what's going on now between us and the University of Nebraska and the Art of Samuel Bak.
Thank you, Bernie. So will you do us the honor and briefly introduce Sam?
So there are two ways to do it. It's like whatever it was in the Johnny Carson show, and here is Sam. Or let me just say, basically, what a joy, delight, and privilege it is. And I've written this any number of times, and I've said it to Sam as well. There is rarely an experience in my life that has been as rich as this has been. There is a generosity and kindness that, and a humanity, which is Sam's, that certainly belies all that he witnessed. And in a way, maybe what he witnessed has helped form him to be, I don't know the other words other than mensch, a quality human being who cares about other people. And even when he was on the campus and there were all sorts of accolades and speeches, but what most brought him pleasure was the opportunity to interact with students. The notion and the awareness on his part that the future is still ahead of us, and by investing in it, it will be better because of his art and because of who he is. So Sam, with pleasure, delighted to be with you.
Sam,
Thank you.
we're honored to have you with us today. What are your thoughts on the importance of this partnership, and welcome to UNO again?
Well, I mean, you said so many wonderful things that it left me speechless, but being speechless now wouldn't be right. So first of all, I must thank you. As Bernie said, when good people meet, what happened here was an incredible chemistry between my desires and between your purposes of education. And I must say that my contact with the younger generation, thanks to the exhibition of my work in university, has given me so much pleasure that the idea to continue with it and to reach many, many, many more young people seem to be a dream coming true. So I understand we have a certain limitation of time in this program, and I cannot go into all the details, but I would still like to show a few chapters of my life in some images from the collection that I have sent to you, which will be visible. And then I think you will just ask me questions.
Okay.
You can go from there.
So just to clarify, you've selected 512 paintings that will be included in the UNO
Right.
collection.
Right.
And is there any thought process that went through the whole?
Well, yes. There was. First of all, I think that it was based on the course of my life and on the main subjects of my work, and I chose works about which I can say something on each one of the works that I selected. Believe me, it was a huge job, and this job isn't finished because right now I am being interviewed or having a conversation with Ayala Tamir, who writes down a little folder of what I have to say about each one of the paintings that you will receive. Because I felt that it will be right for some students, when I'm not anymore there, to be able to look at a certain work and say, what did he mean at that time? Which doesn't mean that these paintings give out their innermost secret or so on, but still there is something to say about all these works. So it was a kind of a collaboration between the two poles. One is the story of my life and the world in which we live, and the other way is what kind of artistic shape I was being able to give to it. And it is between those two things that I navigated continuously, looking at so many works and choosing the 512 that I decided should go to you.
Thank you.
Dave,
So-
let me just mention at one point that if and when that gets done, and hopefully it will be published in the 3 volumes with all of Sam's commentaries, both as a hard copy and online, virtually nothing in art history exists like that. The privilege of not only having the work, an entire lifetime of an individual creating beautiful and amazing pieces of work, but also their introduction to each one of those pieces, it's extraordinary. And it's extraordinary, one, and from my perspective, wonderfully that Sam's still here. So he's able to do it.
I appreciate
it. Thank you. And to leave the legacy. So it's an amazing thing. And once again, it needs to be on a university campus where it's accessed and treated as real documentation for scholars and for students.
You couldn't have said it better.
Thank you. So we get to look at 11 of them today, and thank you for doing that. The first 2 were works highlighted are Child of the Ghetto and Fear, both of which you completed in 1946. Can you tell us about those?
Yes, well, in 1946, I was in a refugee camp in Germany. I left Vilnius, where I was born, immediately after the end of the Second World War, 45. I wrote a whole book called Painted in Words that tells the story of our travels with my mother and myself, the survivor of our family. And I was very lucky that in the DP camp, there was an American officer who provided me with the help of his wife in New York with watercolors and paper and so on. And I started to paint and produce quite a good number of works. So the first image here is, I called it a child of the ghetto, not a boy or not a girl, because I really do not know myself what it is. But this child is somehow, has made some steps in the snow. And I must say, I'm not very often admiring my own work. The only thing that leaves me kind of amazed about my own doing are the things that I did when I was 13, 14, 15. I absolutely have no idea where it came from for me from. And these are things that I would have been very proud to be doing today. So you have this image, it speaks for itself. And the next image, which will follow, is called Fear. It's a large gouache. And in some way, it's of course, it's very literary, it's very illustrative, it's what a boy of 13 that I was, but I painted it, could produce, a little expressionistic, but it somehow prepares the ground for another painting that I did many years later in the 70s called The Family, which is a big collection of faces. So at that time, I knew that I had to say something about our past, but at the same time, I did still lifes, I did watercolors of landscapes, I did all kinds of things, because the Holocaust in itself was not the only subject that preoccupied me. With my friends, I had a wonderful time in the DP camp. We were children and we knew how to enjoy life. And from there, of course, I went to Israel. And the next image will show you something that I did when I was already 18 or 19 from my window. Israel in 1952 was then 4 years old. It has absorbed a population of about 650,000, has absorbed little by little almost 1 million of other people. It is just, imagine, it's as if the United States decided to absorb about, I don't know, 500 million refugees from the world. And Israel was a poor country, and the building went on. We lived on the bare necessities of life, but it was absolutely extraordinary. And I was very, very lucky at that time that I was in a school, in a high school, but I had fantastic teachers. After that, they created a university, which is called today the Tel Aviv University. But every one of our teachers was an important professor of a German university before the 35 or 36. So Israel gave me an extraordinary possibility of learning things that I would have never, ever achieved in any other place. At the same time, it gave me also a desire to move on, to be an artist, to be a contemporary artist, to know what is going on in the world, and so on. And from there, I move to the next image. And the next image is what it meant to me then to be a contemporary artist. It meant to go into abstractions. It meant to go into shapes. It meant to go into colors. This is a little watercolor that I did in Paris where I was a student. And I have chosen a good number of these because, of course, they already tell you about some other artists that were at that time celebrated and that influenced me. And the abstractions occupied me for some time. In '59, I had an exhibition in Rome, and it was a very successful exhibition. It was my first exhibition, and it sold out. So I was somehow working as an abstract artist, and the abstractions allowed me to express emotionality, to express myself. If we go to the next image, I think it will show you where the abstractions brought me to. They brought me to speaking about being torn apart, about horror. The shapes became dark. The shapes became painful. There is in this painting hovering over all these bits and pieces of cloth and so on. You don't know what it is. There is a yellow star that I was supposed to wear on my coat in the ghetto. It brought me this kind of expression also to some, what I consider today, some very fine art, some very good examples of what went on in Europe. The fact is that I was invited to participate at the Carnegie International in Pittsburgh as then one of the important young artists. Speaks for itself, but it somehow brought me to a point in which I felt that I must change the language that I am using to speak to the public that I want to speak to, which means tell them a story of the world in which we live, of which the experience of the Holocaust is a part, a very important part, but is a story that tells of what men can do to other men. So if we go to the next image, after that, you can see that I became, in about 1 year of working on myself, a very representational artist, but a representational artist that deals with metaphors. I realized several things about myself. First of all, how lucky I was. I was incredibly lucky. I came from a community in Vilna of which only 5% of the community survived. I was among the 2,000 Jews of a community of about 80,000 that survived. Life was given to me as an incredible gift, on top of a talent to be able to speak with images. And of course, on one hand, my house was destroyed. My self, I was waiting there. I don't know if you can see it on the screen of your computer, but there is a little man in a coat standing in the middle of a tempestuous sea, waiting for a boat to take him somewhere. And what he wants to bring to the world are images of trees, are images of mountains, are images of towns, are images of also the smoke, that here is a smoke still of gas, but in some of other paintings of mine, it becomes stone. I think that I cannot tell you the whole history of my art here, but we can go to the next image. And I will show you one of the many works that I have done of the tablets of the law. The tablets of the law are an absolutely extraordinary condensation of a morality that exists. And there is this midrash, this legend of Moses that came down from the Mount Sinai and stopped a moment and saw down in the valley the Jews all dancing around a golden calf. And the rabbis asked, how was he able to carry these heavy tablets of stone? And then they answered, they said, well, the heavy tablets of the stone were kept by the letters that were engraved into them, by the letters of the laws, of the 10 Commandments. But when his heart broke because he saw how the tribes of Israel were dancing around money, were dancing around gold, were dancing around a certain Trumpism, the letters tore off and went away into the sky. And then the stones broke. And I want to say something, those letters that go into the sky, the letters that make sentences, the letters that give a sense to what we want to say, these are to me very, very important things, because I think that if my paintings can speak, they can only speak through other people that use letters. So for me, this painting, which is a part of many other paintings that deal with the same subject, is something quintessential about what I believe that the university can do about my art. And then we can go.
Sam,
Yeah.
let me just interrupt briefly, because this and what Sam has said, Dave, is a perfect opportunity for all that are participating today to engage with their own interpretation and response to this. We have shown a number of paintings like this in the gallery over the years, and I'm astounded by the depth of understanding that people, especially young people, bring to this, because they see this in many instances as an example of a world in total disarray, where the commandments represented the foundation of Western life, and suddenly it's all broken, it's all falling apart, it's all flying away, in the sense that no longer are we grounded in certain fundamental beliefs and understandings and sense of respect for our other human beings. And this image and the beauty of it at the same time, the source of light that's hitting the letters at the top of the painting and on the edge of the tablets, so that Sam works both with content, but also with the beauty of composition and color. And so as we go through these remaining pieces, I hope that you and others who are watching will engage with each of the images in their own way with their own questions.
Thank you, Bernie. Thank you. That was a very, very wonderful remark. So we can go on from this image. And you saw before that man standing there waiting for a boat is a kind of a self-portrait, and here is a kind of a whimsical self-portrait. It is a man who is eating something, and in order to be able to eat something, he is devoting to his life to something that is eating him. It is also, I mean, my paintings can be seen from the same paintings from very many points of view. There is also a certain humor in my paintings. I became very successful and known as the painter of the pears. And because I produced a very good number of paintings on pears. It all started with an exhibition that was supposed to happen in France, where they asked me to provide 8 paintings of mine. And I painted kind of 8 allegories of the world in 8 paintings of pears, thinking that the French will understand what I meant, because Daumier, the famous caricaturist, has made a portrait of their king in the form of a pear. So the pear carries in itself a metaphorical sense. But then the exhibition did not happen because of all kinds of political understandings and misunderstandings and so on. And the paintings just went their way. And I painted many, many more pears, because the pears enabled me to say so many things about which I wanted to speak, or mostly not so much to speak as to intrigue people to ask questions. So from this pear painting, we can go on and see that in terms of the self-portrait concept in my work, there is this little boy from the photograph of the child in the ghetto of Warsaw that to me was always something that carried all the children, the 1.5 million of children that perished in the Holocaust. And later on, I must say, when I saw the Syrian child dead in the water on a beach, one of the thousands and thousands of children that perish continuously. I'm thinking even of the children that died of the coronavirus here in the States, that were taken away from their parents and put in a kind of an asylum and so on. The children as the big victims of man's misdeeds are a series of paintings of mine that to remind people that things must change and people must do something about this sacrifice. And what is in this particular painting important, it is because it has something to do with the Akedah, with the sacrifice of the son, that comes to us from the Bible. Because already the Bible started to tell us of what man is capable of doing because of a certain misinterpretation of an idea. So let's go on from there.
Wait, please don't go. Can you go back, Courtney?
Yeah, okay.
I just want, I'm sorry, only because there are a number of other associations beside the altar
for sure.
with the binding of Isaac on which the little boy is standing. There is a child's game of the cat's cradle where you take string between your hands and create a structure, which in a way entraps the little boy and it's burning. And then to the left of the little boy, on the right-hand side of the painting, if you look carefully, the rope itself is a question mark. And remember that each of Sam's paintings is not only what he's saying now, but are loaded with questions. I always love his image of Matryoshka dolls, because in one painting are 100 other paintings or 100 other questions that we as the viewer need to be asking as we're invited into the world of Sam Bak.
Thank you, Bernie. Thank you. Well, that's it. How do we see reality? How do we see reality? Do we see the cup full? Do we half cup full? Do we see the half cup empty? It is this questioning, the questionings that my paintings do, the questioning that I continuously do with myself. How do I react to the world? What do I do? I must say that almost every morning when I go into my studio, I ask myself, what the hell am I doing here? I have already produced so much. Now at age 87, why do I feel that I must still do and do and do and more? Well, all these questions, what do I think of my life? Am I sufficiently famous? Maybe I'm very famous and I don't know it. Is it important being famous? Not at all. What is important is to be in a well-heated room where there is oil paint and there are white canvases, and I can still be in a relatively good health that allows me, even at age of 87, compete with myself, with the self that I did, that I was 10 years ago and 20 years ago and 40 years ago and 70 years ago. So here is half and half. And then let's go on. And this is the last of the 11 paintings, which is something of who are we? I always feel somehow that I am a pawn, but I'm in a game. I have something to say, I guess. There is something of Janus in it. The two faces that go in two different directions. There is one mask looking to the right, one mask looking to the left. Again, it is related to the half and half, to this, to our, as humans, being able to desire at the same time something and just the opposite. Desire to keep all our money to ourselves and not pay taxes, and yet knowing that we must pay, because when we pay, this money is supposed to take care of other people, of people who did not have our possibilities. Well, all this is stuff that preoccupies me, that makes me think like that man up there who wears a hat, not of the kind that I am wearing, but thinks. So here I am. I think that I have given you all that I could in a few words about my work.
Dave, do you want to just spend a moment with this painting and understand that Sam, in this painting particularly, invites us into the game of chess, and that the pawn is one of the most put upon characters in the entire game of chess, generally manipulated, sacrificed, and the figure behind is holding a fragment of a chessboard, as there is on the lower left as you look at the painting. And I once asked Sam, why are the chessboards in all of your chess paintings never whole? And I loved his response. He said, you know, the board itself defines the rules of the game. And in life, there are no such rules. So they're fragments of lives, they're fragments of the board. There's a sense of brokenness, a sense of what could have been, what might have been. And so each time that I look at his paintings, and this is a painting I haven't seen for some years, again, it's a sense of us as human beings encountering the questions that make up our lives and the choices that we make in that process. So it's a perfect painting, it seems to me, to both begin with and end with. Sam, I love listening to you as ever.
Thank you, Bernie. Thank you so much for your enriching input.
What a real special treat it was for all of us to take this journey through these paintings. We do have a first question here from Dr. Kurt Steinberg. So when you transition from abstract to representational painting, is there a moment or an objective that motivated you as an artist to transition? Did you feel that your message was clearer or better represented in the representational style? And have you ever explored abstract style since you moved to representational painting?
Well, I do not believe that there is a much difference between representational and non-representational painting when it becomes good art. I think that every representational painting must work in terms of it being also an abstraction, of its shapes being put together well. The more I look at my paintings of the past, the less difference I see myself with my eyes between my representational art and my more abstract art. I believe it is just a matter of the language that we use. Abstractions have gone very much into elaboration of the decorative elements in art and into aspects of bravura and technical inventions, which are absolutely fantastic and can be very, very impressive. I am a great admirer of the great abstract artists and abstract art. And if I chose what I chose to do, it is simply because I felt that in terms of communication, the form of discourse that I decided to do was serving me better. That is
So,
more or less my.
Courtney, I don't know if you can go back to the painting of the boy, with the Binding of Isaac.
Yeah.
There was a question about that one. This is from Bob Wolfson. Does the painting, and I saw the same thing, Bob, does the painting with the Binding of Isaac reference in the flame Hebrew letters?
Are there any Hebrew letters here? Yes. There is in the fire, up in the painting, there is a shin.
Yeah.
The shin, which stands for Shaddai, which stands for my breasts, which is the feminine name of God. So there is a Hebrew letter in this.
Yes. So what value, this is from Quentin Rasser, what value might explicit depictions of genocidal violence have in the art world and the fields of genocide study and prevention?
Well, first of all, these paintings are documents. These paintings are documents. I'm sure had I not been personally born in the place I was born and the year that I was born, and then given the chance to survive, I would have never been a witness of the horrors that I have seen, and then being able to be a witness and speak of it. And I think that speaking of the terrible mistakes that were made in the past is extremely important for the survival of humanity. I mean, as a father, I was bringing my little children to the road and telling them, now you see, you don't cross the road, you look to the right, you look to the left, and if you see that there is no car and you see that there is a light, you can cross it. Otherwise, it will be a disaster. You see, so my experience bringing to them was very important. I think with the same thing I can say to the public today, you know, there was the year 33 in which I was born. It was the year that Hitler came to power. Now Hitler decided, like many Americans think today, that democracy is a bad thing. Why should democracy be there? Let's make money, let's make more money, let's be more powerful and so on. And I can tell them, no, just hold on a moment, hold on a moment. We can learn from mistakes that were done in the past, and we can try to prevent some mistakes. So this is why I'm painting paintings, and this is why I think that the Holocaust is very important.
Dave, let me just add that Sam touched upon the fact that these are documents. I would argue basically that this is both witness and testimony. And one of the issues we've had with the US Holocaust Museum is that their mandate is only to show works done up until 1944. My view is that Sam's work is visual testimony. And so each of these pieces references that past event with the call out that Sam just mentioned to all of us to be wary as we live in the present and look toward the future. And it seems to me more than anything else that Mark, as a classroom teacher, needs to respond to that question as well.
Indeed. And by the way, Sam, I just want to call your attention to the fact that indeed some of these questions are coming from scholars, but they're also some of them coming from students. And these are some of the students that are in my class right now. So they're already engaging with your art, which is so wonderful to see.
Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful.
So Dr. Steinberg asked another good question. You once shared a story at an event that he attended that explored the origins of the teacup paintings.
Yes.
Would you be willing to share that behind the scenes story of the teacups?
Well, I shared so many stories of teacups. I don't know what exactly he means. I mean, I painted a whole series of paintings taking the cup, because the cup is a representation of something that has two very different senses. When you say my cup is full, it means I had a lot in life, and also I had a lot of suffering in life. So as I said, I'm extremely taken by the contradictions that art can include in itself, because the inclusion of contradictions makes me think of our psyche, of, as I said before, of our desire to have something and to have just the opposite of it and hold the two things together. So these paradoxes nourish my paintings, and this is why the cup, which is also sometimes is in a certain cultures an object that foretells the future, that makes people read into one's own psyche and desires. The reading of the stains of the coffee in the cup is something that has a very Mediterranean culture. So I really don't know what exact.
Let me help, Sam, because there is another story that you shared with me years ago when Kaczerginski, I believe, and Tuskover wanted to take you to visit an artist, an established adult artist in the ghetto.
Oh, yes.
And when you got to his studio, the artist had been deported and probably killed.
Yeah.
And what was on the easel was a painting of a cup, a saucer,
drawing
and
of
a
a
spoon.
boy. Yeah. Yeah.
And
I
so
have produced a painting. Well, actually, thank you, Bernie, for reminding me this, because there are so many things that cups bring to my mind. But this is when in the ghetto, I was 9 years old, and the poet, the Sutzkever, arranged for a friend of his, an artist, who was then in the ghetto, to give me some lessons. And I was brought to the place where he used to live. And an old woman opened us, I think she was an aunt of his and so on. And she said, no, he did not return from his slave labor unit. And it was obvious that he was shot on the day or the day before. And there in that place, there was a big drawing of his. And there was a portrait of a boy and a cup. And I was very impressed by the image of the cup, very, very impressed. And it somehow, for me, was a recreation of that impression of the ability of telling things and injecting emotions upon a two-dimensional surface that then have a language of their own and speak.
So the next question is from Dr. Frank Bramall. He's professor of English at UNO. He says, thank you for sharing these beautiful paintings. As a linguist, I'm particularly interested in Gone and how it refers to the revival of Hebrew and the use of the writing system. Since you're a multilingual speaker, could you talk about the role of language in your process of creating art?
Well, language is, my goodness, language is for me maybe one of those things that has a very specific part in my brain that has enriched me, because to begin with, I started by speaking Polish and Russian when I was very small. And then when I was confronted with anti-Semitism at age 4 or before age 5, my mother took me out from the Polish-speaking kindergarten and put me into a Yiddish-speaking kindergarten so that I would know why I am a Jew, because we were a rather secular family. My parents did not go to the synagogue and so on, but my mother had a very proud sense of her Jewish identity. So Yiddish became my language. And then, of course, the war, and then our coming to Germany, I learned German. Then I went to Israel. I learned Hebrew. I did my studies in Hebrew. Then, of course, I studied English. Then I went to France. I went on studying in French. So I picked up French. Then I lived for many years in Italy. Italian became my language, became the language to which I was speaking with my children in Italy. So I was always very much aware of the language. And believe me, it is not so simple to live with so very many languages, because every time I hear a sound, which in English, he means he, that man, but in Hebrew says he, that woman. And so it becomes important, but it's also a very enriching thing. You understand how these letters that create language, they are in some way, they came from hieroglyphs. They came from hieroglyphs. Every letter has its meaning. The Hebrew letters have their meaning. For instance, the Aleph, which is in this very painting floating on top here, comes from the aluf, which is here, which is an ox, which is this. But when you put it like that, when you turn it over, like that, it becomes an A. So every Hebrew letter comes from a hieroglyph. The Reish, Rosh, comes from the head. The Kaf, just the shape of the hand, and so on. So this in itself is very important. Besides that, letters always fascinated me in terms of inscriptions that I saw on walls, on monuments, on tombstones. So the letters became, as well as numbers, became something that I know are so inscribed in the human psyche that they're among those objects that are part of how we think. And there is so much to speak about language. My goodness, I don't think that I could do enough on this subject alone.
Dave, let me just add one wonderful matter. For years, a woman named Anita Sherwood worked with us in the gallery, actually for 37 years. And one of her birthdays, Sam got up and toasted Anita. And Anita was a Southern belle, very petite. And Sam said to her, Anita, I wish you happy birthday. You remind me of Martin Buber. And everyone kind of laying back in their chair and said, that's not possible. And he said, yes, your name is Anita, Ani va'ata. In Hebrew, that is I and thou. But when you merge the Ani va'ata, it becomes Anita. And it was just wonderful to realize that Sam keeps hearing all of these different languages at different moments, and they inspire images, but they also inspire a sense of perspective and irony that informs so much of his work.
So this is a question from Eve Cole. The chess theme is very expressive and the metaphor leaves little for interpretation for someone who knows the game. What about those who are outside of the chess culture? What do you expect them to get out of your powerful art?
Well, first of all, they can learn the game if they are curious enough. But besides that, I think that almost everyone knows what chess is, that it is a game, even if they don't know the rules of the game. There are novels. Stefan Zweig wrote a famous novella about the chess game. Nabokov wrote a book about the chess game. I mean, the chess has nourished writers and artists. There was a famous chess player artist who was Marcel Duchamp, and Duchamp paintings of chess players. So this is not something very unusual, but that world in which rules are supposed to exist, and I must say that personally, my stepfather, a survivor of Dachau, who lost his wife and his two daughters in the Holocaust. My mother married in 46 in the DP camp. He was a very good chess player. He was the president of the Lithuanian Chess Club. He was an inventor of chess problems and so on. And I saw him sometimes sitting in a chair, playing chess with himself. And for playing chess, he did not need any pieces. He did not need a board. Everything was floating in his mind. So I was kind of brought up by a chess player who made me into a very mediocre chess player. And then when I started to lose all the games against my daughter when she was 11 and 12, I realized I'll give up the playing of chess.
Lovely.
So this is from Connie Schaefer. You may remember Connie, who did a lot of work on the program here with the schools. Do you ever go back to a previous painting, say one you did 10 or 20 years ago in the past?
Yes.
And now find a different story within or different understanding of your own work.
Well, I must say, you know, every time that I speak about a painting that I have done now, that I've done 20 years ago, that I've done 40 years ago, I know very well that I am who I am today, and that memory is not a folder that you put into your computer and when it comes out, it is the same. Memory is always a recreation. So I am trying as much as I can to look at something that I did as a child or that I did as an abstraction, but I am aware that I am 87 and that at 87, I look at it and all the various synapses that work in my brain make connections that are different from the ones that produced the work when it was produced. So there is only that much that we can do within our human possibilities.
One more question. And I think this will tie everything nicely because it asks a question about witness. I'm thinking of the importance of respectful witnessing as opposed to other forms of witnessing that may be voyeuristic, sentimentalizing, and so forth. What suggestions might you offer teachers who seek to foster respectful witnessing in their students? What can teachers do to ensure that students are witnessing your paintings and the profound testimony they express with respect?
I think that unfortunately he died, but had he been here, I would have asked Socrates to come and answer it for me. I think the answer would have been, ask them questions. Ask them questions, ask them what they see, what they imagine, and then try through their questions, to their answers, go to the very important things that are not in my paintings, but that are in life, are in their reality, are in the reality of their parents, are in the reality of the country in which they live, and are in the realities of other countries that do not even have the privilege of being able to be confronted with a painting and speak of it. So I would say that asking questions about what they see is the right way.
So before we recess, Mark, is there anything you would like to ask or add to the conversation at this point?
No, I think, Sam, you've done such a tremendous job of taking us, giving us snapshots through your work, your evolution of your style, looking at some of the different places you've lived. I can't thank you enough. I know you're a busy man, and it's a lot to take you away from your work when you paint. So we definitely appreciate.
Thank you. This is a privilege.
Bernie, any final words?
Well, I think Sam had the final word when he answered your original question as to why it should be on a university campus and at UNO. And that is that universities need to be a place of questions and more questions and more questions. So it could not have been a more perfect response to, I think, the entire event, which is we're so excited to make sure that these paintings are preserved and these questions endure and make a difference in the world. Thank you, Dave, for everything.
Yes, and thank you, Sam. What an honor it was for you to share this time with you today. Bernie, thank you. It's always a pleasure to be with you. Mark, thank you for your leadership on all of this and bringing this to UNO. And to our audience, thank you for joining us today. We look forward to the future of the opening of the Bak Museum and Learning Center at UNO. And look for our next seminar, which will be held either in January or February of next year. So thank you all very much for joining us today. And have a great, peaceful holiday season, and please stay well.
Thank you.
Thank you.